Ross Dellenger, quarterbacking SI's coverage of college football. You can follow him on Twitter at Ross Dellenger. He has been there since 2018. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio, and this is a chance to talk with Ross, get some industry insights, and also look at his career as it continues to thrive and expand. Ross, what is it about the Clarion-Ledger where you used to work that's become a pipeline for so many successful people in sports media? You talk about yourself, you talk about Courtney Cronin, you talk about Ian Rapaport, even your wife.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of interesting to look back on and see where we all are. In fact, I'm in DC now because of my wife. And Kareem Copeland is there. He was a Clarion-Ledger alum as well. He covers basketball for the Washington Post. So it's crazy. I think it probably starts with the sports editor that we had there, at least from a sports standpoint. Rusty Hampton was the guy that hired all of us and I guess developed us, you might say. And so, yeah, that was that probably a lot of it goes back to him. And at the time we had a really big staff at the Ledger. I mean, it was significant. So we were able to have the resources to hire people and send people to places and cover a lot of things.
How did Ian Rapaport help develop you as a writer and a storyteller?
Well, I certainly, read Ian a lot. So he was covering obviously Mississippi State for the Clarion-Ledger, and I was in school there at Mississippi State at the same time. So we hung out a little bit, got to know each other, and I read him and learned from his writing, but really more so, Ian probably helped me as a reporter, just tips here and there, and seeing how he treated and worked with coaches and administrators and things like that. So he helped me significantly from that standpoint. But I remember Ian really made the call for my first job out of college, my first sports writing job out of college for me, covering Auburn for the Decatur Daily, and he made the call to the then sports editor there and put in a good word about me. And I'm not sure if he wouldn't have done that if I would have gotten that job.
Is a way of you thanking him for that, having the success you've had yourself, to show him that you made the right decision in making that phone call, and look how I've turned out?
I guess so. Although something tells me, Ian's he's big. He's such big and bad these days. He doesn't care about us underlings. But no, he I'm sure he sees my success. I hope that he thinks of that. But yeah, I think he's got 2 kids now, and he obviously has a huge job. He seems like he's always working, and I do get to catch up with him at events where college and pro kind of come together. So the Senior Bowl is one of those, and the combine and the draft. I've seen him every now and then, so it's good to catch up with him.
How has Andy Staples helped you?
Well, it's another guy who I don't know that I would have had the job or a job without him. Going from an LSU beat writer to Sports Illustrated and a national job was, mostly because Andy saw potential in me and suggested me to his bosses. So, I got there and then he left me after a year, but I still give him crap for that. But I know he got me there, and that was obviously probably the biggest opportunity of my career, and certainly have him to thank for that.
When did you first see potential in yourself?
I'm still looking. It's I don't know. I never envisioned having being a national writer. It's never something. I was very content being a beat writer. I enjoyed being a beat writer. Enjoyed investing in a team and studying a team and writing everything that a team and its players and coaches do. I always thought that was kind of where I would stay. So I never really thought of myself as ascending to anywhere more than that, really. And I just it's just, I think that I'm not necessarily, I don't have any kind of special talent or anything. I think it just comes from probably two things, working hard at the craft, in two, just treating people well. Uh, I've, young journalists ask me about secrets and stuff like that, and secrets, especially in sourcing. There's really no secret except just being like a good human, and a good person.
Speaking of being a good person, speaking of sourcing and building those relationships, how do you how have you become that entrusted source that people can go to in order to report a story, whether it's a positive one or whether it's a negative one?
Well, there obviously is trust that must happen. You've got to gain the trust of very important people, and that takes time. It takes time and takes a lot of effort. Sometimes it takes more than just stories and the things you might produce. It takes beer. I mean, really, it takes going out to get a cocktail. It takes dinner. Um, it takes things like that to go out and meet people and then let them into your world so that they know you, understand you. Again, it's just kind of being, you know, it, a good guy. It's being a social person, and that's really important in the industry. But also, obviously, what you produce is very important, and being fair in stories, being accurate in stories. That's the biggest thing. I've probably gotten more contacts and sources through stories that triggered people to reach out to me or to contact me or something like that because they enjoyed a story or thought it was well reported. So it's also about the product.
What's the most daring thing you've done to chase a story?
Mm. Um, when I was a beat writer at LSU, there were certainly a lot of things in that time covering LS Miles and Ed Orgeron that you you did to chase a specific story. Sometimes it's driving a long way. I don't know if I'd describe things as daring. I don't know that I have something that I would describe as daring, but I certainly, one thing that sticks out is before Ed Orgeron played Ole Miss for the first time as LSU's coach, he mentioned um, in a news conference on Monday before the Saturday game that he had really enjoyed his time in Oxford and liked the city and liked a specific gas station, chicken on the stick at a specific gas station. And I just kind of clung on to that. And I went up a couple of days later and drove up to Oxford early and found the chicken on the stick gas station and found the attendant who used to sell the chicken on the stick that Orgeron. So again, probably not daring, but there's things like that that you go out of your way to chase a specific story. When Les Miles got fired, that was a crazy 24-hour period, the most crazy in my career. And you do things and you talk to people during that time, or you go snooping around the athletic facility, the football facility. I did all those things, and I broke that news, which was the most significant of my career. Parked in a car in the LSU football facility after driving back on about 3 hours of sleep from Auburn, where LSU had played the night before. So that one sticks out, sure.
When you think about all the stories that you've broken, what's the most extreme a school has gone in rebelling against you, in you just doing your job?
Yeah. Well, it certainly, there were some times at LSU where that did happen, where my credentials by a specific administrator at LSU were threatened to be pulled if I ran a specific story or wrote it a certain way. That did happen, and it's unfortunate that those things those things happen, but it kind of happens everywhere. And that it was, I don't remember what specific story was over, and it certainly happened a handful of times. But obviously, people are going to go great lengths to do what they think is their job. In uh, that administrator at LSU and those all over the nation think it's their job, and maybe it is their job to protect the school, athletes, and coaches at all cost. And that's one thing about being a reporter and having success in the industry, is understanding other people do have a job to do, and it's probably not doesn't necessarily align with yours.
What sort of resolve and inner strength do you have to keep up with that journalistic integrity, even if there's pressure that, somebody wants you to run it a certain way, but you have a set of morals and ethics that you want and need to follow?
Yeah, yeah, right. We there was a story this past fall that involved COVID in a very high profile football coach. And um, you know we thought we had the news of him, getting COVID, and then passing tests to be cleared and all that stuff. And we got into a pretty intense discussion that involved lawyers at SI getting involved. And by the time we had it rectified, the school itself had released the news. So that was frustrating. Those things are frustrating. But you do have to understand the other side, and it is an ethical game we all play, and balancing that, okay, this is think about it as your grandpa, your dad, and you I had a reporter chasing a story like this, and put yourself on the other side. Always try to in somebody else's shoes. And that was a case of us thinking that the personal, I guess, medical uh, information of this coach was something we didn't want to risk. But that happens all the time. You have ethical kind of dilemmas, and you just try to strike the right balance.
Ross Dellenger is with us with Sports Illustrated. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. What's an article looking back now that you wish you had more time on, or that you wish you could edit?
Who, certainly a lot of them. You never think you have enough time, uh, especially during a season when you're working on it. I do more of the expansive, longer stories and storytelling and the enterprise type profiles, and so I do less of the maybe short news kind of stories. But you have to stay on top of everything, and so you try to do what you can when it comes to news stuff. And a lot of times news can get in the way of your main job, which kind of is features and in enterprise stuff and investigative stuff. So there's certainly a lot of those where because a news story broke or something, that I got distracted and weren't able to complete. And then there are the stories where um, you spend hours, if not days, on, and they don't come together for whatever reason. Those are incredibly frustrating. I had a Tony Elliott story ready to go. Literally was about to publish about an hour. Say it was like 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon, about 2 days before the semifinal, the Sugar Bowl, Clemson, Ohio State. In about an hour before it was set to publish, Clemson announced that Tony Elliott didn't make the trip because he had COVID. So that stunk. I still have that story. I'll have to redo it a little bit, but hopefully we can run it at some point. But it's those things that certainly get frustrating, or sometimes you have a lead source of a story who has been spending a lot of time off the record capacity talking to you, and he or she agrees to speak on the record later, and you're gearing up for this big bombshell, and they back out at the end for whatever reason. So that's happened as well.
Final question for you, Ross Dellenger with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. You were hearkening back to the 2020 season with Tony Elliott. What about the 2020 college football season are you most pleasantly surprised about in the way it was pulled off?
Well, I think around 1/5 or 1/4 of games were impacted in some way, either canceled, delayed, or rescheduled, which is probably a little smaller number than I had anticipated would be. I thought it'd probably be at least a third of games would be impacted, and it was close to that. But they did a pretty good job of being able to play games and play that amount of games. So that was certainly uh, a pleasant surprise, and getting around. Ended up traveling to 11 games, which
Wow.
I think was tied with the most, at least from what I can tell, of any college writer or national writer, at least. Some beat writers may have gone to more, I don't know, but me and Chuck Culpepper of the Post each went to 11 games. We ended up determining, and I just thought I would be safe and be able to do it. If they're playing, then I should get out there and I should cover it. And it was just amazing how few people I saw. I was basically a lot of times the only one traveling about. So it was certainly memorable.
Yeah, and certainly there will be many books and many articles and maybe even movies written about how that college football season was pulled off. And Ross has been behind so many of those. Ross, thank you so much. I'm Bryan Fenley. Really appreciate a couple moments of your time.
Yeah, no problem, Brian.